Yeah. So the question here asked by Lalit Babu is, what are the rules and regulations? What are the rules and regulations one should follow? So one general rule Holy Mother says is, do not eat food which is offered or offered to the ancestors in a Shraddha ceremony. You should not be eating Shraddha food everywhere and anywhere. If anybody invites you, just don't go. Now, second is, offer to God whatever you eat. Now, this is very important. One must not eat unoffered food. Now, this is a very simple thing to do. Apparently, it's a very simple thing to do, but difficult to remember. So, Mother says, as your food, so will be your blood. From pure food, you get pure blood, pure mind, and strength. Three things she is mentioning here. First, the pure food as it gets assimilated, whatever we consume, after offering to God, of course. So, the food, offered food purifies the soul, purifies the body first, purifies the blood, and that pure blood purifies the mind, and it gives you some kind of strength, both spiritual and physical. Pure mind begets ecstatic love, prema bhakti. So, for especially those who follow the path of bhakti yoga, for them, this food is very important because a bhakti yoga does not deny the senses. If you remember, Sri Ramakrishna used to tell Narendra and give Narendra any food. He did not bother if the food is not come from a pure source. But with others like Baburam Maharaj and Latu Maharaj and all, he was very careful. He said, no, no, this food has not been offered, don't give him. But with Narendra, he was very open and very liberal. Why was that? He says Narendra is like a burning fire of jnana. So for a Gyani, these rules do not apply. They do not apply, but one has to be a very firm Gyani. One has to discriminate between real and unreal. And that is very rare. So among all the disciples, it was only Narendranath. Even Brahmanandji was not given the food. If Thakur felt that food is not come from a pure source, from a devotee who has done cooked, if the devotee has cooked some food with some ulterior motive, with the hope that if I offer this food to sadhus, maybe my I'll get some gross material benefit. So such tainted food, Sri Ramakrishna would immediately, he could not even touch that food. So many times it has so happened that people with selfish desires, if they brought something, Thakur would not touch it. So only that food, even he felt hesitant to offer that food to God. So that is one condition. Then, but Lalit Babu says, Mother, but we are householders. What shall we do at the Shraddha ceremony of our own relatives? Now, this is a very tricky question because he is not saying Shraddha ceremony of his own family members, relatives. So it is very natural that distant relatives also invite you. Then mother gives a very, very practical advice. You see, some people will say, just don't attend the ceremony. You have nothing to do. But that spoils relations. So truth has to be told, truth has to be practiced, but it has to be practiced in such a way that people are not hurt. So Holy Mother says, supervise the ceremony, give all help you can. If they need help, give, so that they understand when they are doing these ceremonies, they also are a bit sad. So they need some mental support. So supervise the ceremony if necessary. You participate, give whatever help you, but very cleverly, she says, but so that they may not be offended, but somehow try to avoid taking meals on that day. If you cannot do that, then on the day of Shraddha ceremony, eat whatever is offered to Vishnu or the other gods. So Shraddha is not just offering to the mains. First, there are some items of food. First, it is offered to Vishnu, and then the other lesser gods. Then finally, it is given to the ancestors. There is a sequence in the Shraddha ceremony. So he says, if you can't, if it is unavoidable, just see which food items were offered to Vishnu. That you can take. But don't offer food. The devotees can partake of the food of the Shraddha ceremony if it is offered to God. So if you offer to God, even during the Shraddha ceremony, uh, some portion of the food is first offered to Vishnu. And then, of course, it is mixed. But if you can identify those items which were given, you just satisfy yourself so that you will not be the hurting the sentiments of the relatives. At the same time, you will be consuming food which has been offered to the Lord and not offered to the spirits. So the harm is that it can affect your bhakti. So Lalit Babu then says, many a time there remains an excess unused foodstuff procured for Shraddha ceremony. Can one cook and eat that? Here is referring to something else. Suppose you bring so many things, but all are not offered. Some things are not offered. So then mother says, yes, you can. That will not injure you. A householder cannot help it. He should not be wasting food. So if some food has been brought, not everything has been used in Shraddha, but that food which has not been used, you can use it and that will not injure you. So see, Holy Mother, how practical she is as regards food. But the important point to note here is that fruit should be offered to the Lord. So it's not a very difficult thing. Mentally, we have that practice when we start lunch or in most of our Vedanta centers. We say Brahmarpanam, Brahmavi. So that's just a reminder that we are offering all the food to Brahman, the fire of Brahman. Fire itself is Brahman. But if we, that is the formless God whom we are worshipping. But if you have an Ishta, you can even chant Sri Ram Krishna's mantra or say Sri Ram Krishna Arpanamastu. You just offer. So after every chanting, after every stotra, after every song, there is a tradition in our Ramakrishna mission that you end that particular uh, song or bhajan or some talk by saying Sri Ram Krishna Arpanamastu, means I have offered this, O Lord, please accept it and see that whatever may be the defects, you just see that you uh, accept it with your whole heart and then uh, do the needful. So that is why even after doing japa, after doing sadhana, we all the fruits of our sadhana are to be offered to the Lord and let Him decide. We should not force our will on God normally, or do this or do that. Uh, we can pray when we are in difficulty, that is a different thing. In a general way, we can say, please remove our sorrow. The essence of all mantras is, I pray to that buddhi, that light within, the Ishta within, who through His grace can remove the darkness of ignorance which results in sorrow. We are ignorant of many things. We are, uh, many times we wish to be something else and we are not able to do it. So that is because of ignorance. We are ignorant of certain subjects, we are ignorant of certain skills. There's a lot of ignorance. In a general way, ignorance can be of two types. One is ignorance of and which binds you to the world. Another ignorance is ignorance of certain things which enable you to live in this world. So Sri Ramakrishna was very practical. So that ignorance also, that is why when Swami Vivekananda could not pray for, when he was, when his father died and he was facing tremendous financial difficulties, Sri Ramakrishna did not say, he says go and ask. But unfortunately he was not able to ask. But still, you see, finally Sri Ramakrishna said, okay, please don't worry, your parents or your family, not your parents, your family will not suffer for want of ordinary food and clothes. And that happened. Though they suffered a lot of poverty, they were never denied a meal. Somebody or the other, Maharaja Ajit Singh and somebody or the other disciples of Swamiji saw to it that a regular sum was always given to the family. I mean, especially the mother, the old mother of Swami Vivekananda, who had two brothers, and she had to look after both of them when Swamiji left. So that kind of prayer we can ask for. But when we offer something, we just offer and consume that as prasad, and then just pray that our ignorance and our suffering is destroyed. That is the essence of offering either food or the mantra. Even offering the mantra after you do sadhana, you tell the Lord, I have done it in whichever way I could. Sometimes I was focusing on the mantra, sometimes I could not. But anyway, I've done it, I've done the sadhana. So, good or bad, I'm just offering it to you. So, also when you cook, sometimes the cooking may be bad. That's why in Belur Math, the offering which goes to Thakur, normally some of the offering, after offering, of course, a plate is sent to President Maharaj and all the senior Swamis. They just want to make sure, not because they want prasad, they want a privilege of getting the prasad. They just want to make sure that the pujari or whoever cooks the bhog or the offering, he does a attentive job. Sometimes he may forget to put some salt. Then they will call the person who has cooked, the brahmachari or swami who has cooked, and they'll say, how can you eat when human beings cannot eat it? You're not forgotten salt. So we know that Swami Vireshwaranji and all, they were very particular about the offering which was done to Thakur. So when you offer with love, then you offer only good things. You don't offer bad things. That is why when Girish Chandra Ghosh was initially reluctant to give up his drinking habit, so Thakur did not say you stop it. He said just offer it to Mother Kali. But he himself felt ashamed. How can I offer this? Mother Kali is given so many wonderful bhoga and fruits and other things. And how can I? So he started feeling hesitant. In the beginning, he used to just offer it to Mother Kali and consume it. But later on, without telling him to stop drinking, he slowly he had some kind of consciousness, guilt consciousness, that how can I offer food, offer this item to the Divine Mother. So that is one of the main ideas behind offering food to God. So you offer very carefully, you offer only good food, and that is naturally offered food is good. Physically also it is good, and mentally also the subtle vibrations of uh, God which are associated with that offered food, they make a huge difference. So it is a good habit to have a small personal shrine, maybe in your own room. It doesn't have to be a separate shrine. But the first thing that we cook, normally once we consume it, we should not offer. That is the rule. That's a general rule. So Prabodh Babu says, Mother, uh, the master loved renunciation, but how little we practice it. I mean, he says we are unable to practice. He was so particular about not wasting food, eating very little, eating only that which was necessary, and that also he would offer and eat. So, how much renunciation he had in his life. But we can't do, we waste food, we eat without any limits and all those things. So, Prabodh Babu is trying to say that how blameworthy we are. Master loved so much of renunciation. We have been initiated in his mantra and we are not able to practice it. But mother says, don't worry, you will also acquire it slowly. You make some progress in this life, a little more in the next, and so on. It is the body alone that changes. The Atman remains the same. Renunciation of lust and gold is the main thing. So here the renunciation of communication, it's not just renunciation of a few items that I will stop eating this item, that item. There are people who think that by renouncing some food items they're performing, or they are renouncing a lot. But here he says it doesn't matter, it may take some time to make progress in spiritual life, but remember that the body alone changes. The body alone, which has to face the effects of karma, will suffer. But if the mind and the Atman doesn't change, the inner spirit, the inner divinity remains the same. Only it is clouded or covered with a dark layer of ignorance. So the moment the essential renunciation is renunciation of lust and gold. So the master used to say, I can change Kamarpukur into gold if I so desire, by requesting Mathur Babu to do so. But what good will that do? It is all transitory. What he meant to say is there was, of course, Kamarpukur was a rather moderate, a village with moderate income. People were not so rich, but their needs were met. They had enough to eat. It was a happy village. But some people were greedy naturally. They were hoarding gold. There were some rich zamindars also there. But the master said, I can change Kamarpukur into gold. If I tell Mathur Babu, he will build so many wonderful things. There will be luxury all around. But what will it do? That's not what, that's not an eternal thing. It is all transitory. Regarding some devotees, the master used to say that it was their last birth. He would remark, referring to some devotee, you see, he has no desire whatsoever for anything. That is a sign of a last, his last birth. So the first sign of a person, one who is inordinately desirous of many things, perhaps that would not be his last birth. Of course, it all depends on the grace of the Lord. But the master used to refer to certain devotees and see he has no desire for anything. And that shows, that was a sign that perhaps it is his last birth. Because even Buddhism, Buddha says, the only reason we migrate from one body into another is desires. So tanha or trishna, trishna means desire. Trishna is in Pali, it becomes tanha. So tanha or trishna, the desire to, any kind of desire, desire for name and fame, desire for money, desire for lust, desire for gold, and all those things say, fall into different categories of desires. So, but one who has very few desires or absolutely no desires, just leading a calm and a life working out his karma, Sri Ramakrishna is to point to them and say this is his last birth. So they would be found to be very dispassionate. If you see Yogananda, in Yogananda's life, we see that he was dispassionate. Though he was the vice president of the mission, he was absolutely dispassionate. And no wonder Sri Ramakrishna used to say that he was Arjuna in his previous birth. He has been born. So perhaps whatever desires were there were fulfilled in the previous birth. All the desires for fighting, for power, and for, but the effect of the Bhagavad Gita perhaps was so much that in the next birth or the next incarnation, Arjuna perhaps, because Sri Ramakrishna used to know intuitively whether one was, see, when he saw Swami Sharadananda and Swami Ramakrishnananda, he said they are born from the, they are, they are, they were associates of Christ in a previous birth. So there was that element of devotion and other things. If you see Shashi Maharaj, the typical devotion and the prayerful attitude with which Christians worship their Lord, you could see in full measure in Swami uh, Ramakrishnananda. So, and then similarly, when he saw Master Masha, he said, I saw you dancing in Chaitanya's party. Means in a previous life, somehow they were associated with the previous incarnations. Like Niranjanananda, for example, Sri Ramakrishna said that he is born of the Ansha of Rama. So maybe when Rama or Rama Avatar took place, these disciples of Rama who had certain characteristics, they were reborn again. And that is why you find in Arjuna, there was in Yogananda, who had perhaps fulfilled all the desires in the previous birth and was so disgusted. Because you see, the result of Mahabharata war itself shows the futility of desires. It may be a good desire. It was a righteous desire for him to fight for their rights, and no doubt he fought that war and he won it also. But after winning it, he realized that that is also transitory, and perhaps that is the reason why in this birth Yogananda was found to be one of the most dispassionate among the monks. He had absolutely no desire for anything, not even for work, no activity. He was just always doing his mantra and very self satisfied. He lived a totally, you may say, a life of total renunciation or total dispassion. That is the right word. Total dispassion towards everything gross. So Sri Ramakrishna used to point to such people and say, this is his last birth. So the devotees prostrated themselves before the mother and took leave of her. Speaking about the objection of certain people that some of Sri Ramakrishna's sannyasin disciples, being who belong to the lower caste, being Shudras, are not entitled for sannyasa. So in once upon a time, there was a rule that certain people belonging to certain castes were not given sannyasa by some of the monastic orders. Even today, that tradition is there. Only the Brahmins or the Kshatriyas or at the most Vaishyas are given. But the fourth caste, the Shudras were not entitled according to the orthodox rule. So Holy Mother said the disciples of Sri Ramakrishna are Gyanis and all Gyanis are sannyasin. So everybody has a right. So whoever follows Sri Ramakrishna, irrespective of his caste, creed or religion, he has he is he has comes under the category of a Gyani. And Gyanis are have the right to sannyasa, irrespective of what their body, which caste their body belongs to. A Gyani can be a sannyasin. Take the case of Gaurdasi. A woman cannot be in those days. It was actually Sri Ramakrishna's pioneering contribution to the world that women were for the first time given sannyasa. And Gaurdasi was one of the, that's why Sri Ramakrishna said, I am pouring the water, you make the mold. So it's a historic decision. What Sri Ramakrishna meant is a new age will come when all the people who were, due to orthodox nature of Indian society or Hindu society, where they were denied sannyas. So the fact Holy Mother says, if one has dispassion, then it really doesn't matter whether he is from a lower caste or she's a woman. So women were not given sannyasa, but in general. But Gaurdasi was given, and after that, when Sharda Mutt started keeping Holy Mother Sri Sharda Devi at the center, and when Holy Mother sanctioned that no, this sannyasa can be given. So Gaurdasi led the way. Of course, she was there. Sri Ramakrishna also knew her. She had taken to sannyasa and she used to move in disguise all over India to all the pilgrim places. Though she was a woman, she was so courageous. So Gaurdasi was a woman, but she was still initiated into sannyasa. She is more than a man. How many men are there like her? So now Mother is praising Gaurdasi, saying, even men do not have the courage she had. In fact, if you read the life of Gaurdasi, who was whom Sri Ramakrishna, who had met Sri Ramakrishna when she was quite young. So she ran away from home, and after sannyasa she wandered all over India so fearlessly. It was so difficult for women to actually move around begging for alms and living like monks do. But she did. That's why Mother says, how many men are there like her? So if there are women like Gaurdasi, then if they can take sannyasa, then other women who have the similar qualities or who have the strength also can take. The master used to say, see what she has achieved, Mother says. Built a school, acquired horses, a carriage, and so forth. She was so dynamic. She started the Saradeshwari Ashrama in Kolkata. And even before Sister Nivedita started the school, she had her own school and she ran it very nicely. The master used to say, if a woman embraces sannyasa, she is certainly not a woman, she is really a man. That doesn't mean Sri Ramakrishna is belittling that, belittling women. Or what he says is, there is biologically one may be a woman, but everybody can have that kind of spiritual strength within. He further used to say to Gaurdasi, I am pouring water, you will make the clay. So he anticipated or he expected women to come forward in large numbers and embrace the life of sannyasa, if not formal sannyasa, at least in spirit. So that is what he said to Gaurdasi, uh, Gauri Ma, as she was known. Of course, mother refers to her as Gaur Dasi, but she was popularly known as Gauri Ma. So, Gauri Ma, Sri Ramakrishna once told her to be an ideal for women to become sannyasins. He said, I am pouring water, you make the clay. What did he mean? When I am giving you the essence and you prepare the formal rituals or prepare the form, outer form of what a sannyasin woman is expected to do in society. You show to the whole world that if a woman takes sannyasa, which was very rare in those days, Orthodox society would not allow that. If at all a woman, she can be as capable as men to run institutions, to run schools, and do all sorts of activities associated with a monastery, found a monastery, run it, administer it, give spiritual initiation. So, Swami Vivekananda believed that true empowerment of women will take place only when they start giving spiritual instructions to disciples, whether men or women. So Sharda Mat nuns give Diksha not only to girls but also to boys or whoever seeks that. So that gender inequality which was there in the spiritual tradition of India was removed by Sri Ramakrishna, and that is why Holy Mother lived for more than 34 years after the passing away of Sri Ramakrishna. So, just as Gaurdasi or Gauri Ma, Holy Mother also inspired innumerable people, gave initiation to innumerable. So, very silently, she carried on the wonderful work which Sri Ramakrishna had started. So, whatever was left incomplete, he says, you have to complete it. And we find for 34 years she did exactly that. So that's why she quotes and says that Thakur has clearly told Gauri Ma that I am pouring water and you make the clay and you make the form. So the next conversation is on 28th March 1913. We'll just take up this conversation because there's some 15 minutes left. It was morning. I entered the inner apartment of the Holy Mother's house and found her cutting Kalmi green. Kalmi green is a kind of uh, green leaves which grow with a creeper. It is actually Kalmi creeper. It floats on the surface of the water. It grows on water. So once you pull it, uh, you pull it, the whole thing comes. So Sri Ramakrishna used to give that example. Seeing her cutting something else along with it, I said, what is this you are cutting up with the Kalmi green? This is this is you are cutting grass with that. So this is grass. The mother said, this is also a kind of green. The complexion of Krishna was like that, like this grass. They say even Ramachandra was slightly green in color. Krishna was of course dark, but it was a dark green color. So Holy Mother says, Ki, what is wrong if a little grass also comes in that? Maybe we can clean it, or even that, if whatever vegetation is there, it is not harmful. So she was seated for the midday meal, and Radhu's mother arranged a leaf plate and a cup of water in the veranda of her house for another guest, perhaps one of her relatives. A cat drank a little water out of the cup. So Radhu's mother changed the water. The cat again drank some of the water and again she changed it. The third time the cat drank, whereupon Radhu's mother chased it and screamed, You rogue, you burnt faced cat, I will kill you. It was hot season. Holy Mother was there. She said, No, no, you must not prevent a thirsty animal from drinking. Besides, the cat has already touched the water. At this, Radhu's mother shouted in anger, You don't have to become compassionate towards the cat. You have showed enough compassion towards man. Why not reserve your kindness for man? So, this Radhu was always like that. Holy Mother said, Why do you, if the cat is thirsty, it will come. Why do you throw that water? Let the cat finish it. You take some other water if you don't want to drink it. There also, one should not prevent a thirsty animal from drinking. So, Radhu's mother was angry and she shouted at Holy Mother. She says, You give away things and you're so liberal, compassionate towards human beings, that is enough. Now don't show compassion towards these animals also. That is, the mother said in a very serious voice. She was really upset by Radhu's mother's dictation, that she is trying to uh, tell mother what she should be doing. He said, he is unfortunate indeed. This is a very famous sentence of Holy Mother. If we just remember this sentence, it will do us tremendous good. You see, many times in life, we have a negative idea of ourselves. We try to blame ourselves for everything. No doubt we have so many faults. We are born here. When we are born, nobody is born without any faults. So everybody has faults. So just as the cat had some faults and Radhu became impatient. So compassion was Holy Mother's nature, whether it is for animal, even a broom, she would not throw it. So that shows how much compassionate she was. That's why she says this memorable sentence. He is unfortunate indeed who does not gain my compassion. I do not know anyone, not even an insect, for whom I do not feel compassion. So that gives us tremendous hope. It's not an empty, these are not empty words. If mother says that, an insect who practically has nothing to do with spirituality, even for that insect, she has compassion. She has compassion for the cat. She told the brahmachari not to beat the brahmachari used to sometimes drive away the cat. So she used to say there is mother in that cat also. So she says, makes a big declaration that he is unfortunate. Whoever does not gain my compassion, means that is next to impossible. Whatever you do, whatever state your mind is in, you just have to surrender to mother and she will shower her compassion without seeing your merits and demerits. That is why self hatred is Holy Mother. Sometimes people used to feel, once one monastic wanted to leave Jairam Bati. She went and told mother, I'm not fit for this place, I want to go. So this kind of self hatred or self criticism, self introspection is good. One has to introspect if whether we are getting angry, whether we are getting jealous, whether there are so many deficiencies, we have to correct it. But that doesn't mean we have to hate ourselves. Just as we have to show compassion towards others' faults, why not show the same towards our faults? Knowing that I am going to correct it, but these faults are there, but I should not get upset. So that's why Holy Mother tries to console such people, saying that even an insect, there is no one whom I know in this world who does not who does not gain my compassion. So Holy Mother's compassion is showered on all, irrespective of who he is, what status is his, what kind of spiritual progress he has made. So that is a tremendous hope Holy Mother gives, and it's a tremendous hope for a spiritual aspirant that whether I deserve it or not, Holy Mother's compassion is uniform. If she can even come, she herself says, not even an insect is there. I do not know anyone, not even an insect for whom I do not feel compassion. So then Holy Mother was sitting for the evening meal, and Mother herself had cooked a curry, potatoes, and other vegetables. She gave some of them to me and said, eat and tell me how you like it. So the disciple, obviously, he did not know. She just gave some vegetables and potatoes cooked, a curry. The, the disciple, not knowing, he said, this is a patient's diet, cool and bland. Who cooked it? I mean, he was used to hot vegetables, hot curries. Then mother said, I myself. Then the disciple asked, you yourself? Mother said, yes. Well, it could be done better. It's not exactly to the taste of people of our part of the country. Now, this person, even though this disciple is so intimate with mother, just as a child complains to the mother, I don't like this. You see, that is the relationship a disciple has with the guru. He should be free. So he or she should be able to tell what is the problem. And Here he does not hesitate. Oh, there are people who say, if I tell the truth and say that the food is not good, so they'll tell lies and they'll say, oh, no, no, the food is very tasty. But the disciple was so close with Holy Mother, he really loved Holy Mother, and he knew Mother cannot be angry. A real motherly figure will never get angry on the children. So he says, you yourself did, but you could have done better. Now, which disciple will tell the Guru this? It requires tremendous courage, tremendous faith, and tremendous love towards the Guru. If one does not really feel that the Guru is one's own, or in this case, it was Holy Mother, though that motherly love is there in all Gurus. But here you see the disciple is so close to Holy Mother. He says it's not exactly to our taste, because our part of the country maybe belongs to East Bengal. So they eat a little spicy food. So he is openly telling Mother, somehow it looks like a patient's diet, it is bland. That shows what kind of intimacy is there. If one has that kind of intimacy or feeling towards Mother or towards one's Guru, then it becomes easy, because then you don't uh, you express everything which is in your mind. Then it becomes easy for Holy Mother, and Holy Mother also never felt bad. She said, okay, next time I'll see. Okay, then you had better taste a little of the liquid portion. But still Mother wants to console him, even though she has criticized the food as bland. She says, why don't you taste the curry? You are perhaps taking only the vegetables, that's why you don't spill the spices. So she wants to just make him happy. Then Nalini says, oh aunt, you never put any red chili in your curry. Can anybody relish it? I mean, Holy Mother rarely put chilies. Because she was cooking for Thakur, who had a very bad stomach. So naturally, that kind of diet every was not to the liking of everybody. So Nalini was also angry, and because she perhaps liked red chilies. Mother to Nalini, don't listen to him. When you eat it, you will find it tastes good. So uh, Holy Mother is convincing, cajoling the disciple and telling her that, you see, it has been prepared with so much of love. It's not the taste or the chili and all those things that make a food palatable. It is cooked by Mother, cooked by herself. So she is telling, just try it, just try. If you eat it, if you start liking it, even the taste will, you will get the taste. Even simple food. Sri Ramakrishna used to, Swami Vivekananda used to say, when Shashi Maharaj used to make rice balls with ghee, sometimes they did not have anything to eat other than rice balls. But Shashi Maharaj used to make it with so much love and concern. And when these people were really hungry, he used to go to the disciples wherever, whichever room they were staying, and then feed them. He said, it's time for lunch. Nobody was bothered about lunch. They were so engrossed in spiritual practices. But once he forced everybody to eat those rice balls with ghee, simple rice balls without any taste. But Swamiji said it tastes like nectar, because it has been prepared by Shashi Maharaj with Swami Ramakrishnan with so much love. So here we see Holy Mother is trying to tell the disciple, just try to feel the motherly love behind the food which we have prepared. Just don't go by taste. Don't be so gross. Anyway, the disciple says, for some days past, I've been asking about the curries you prepare, and I've tasted some of them, but they all taste alike. The disciple is still not having the intelligence to understand what Mother is trying to convey. But you see, she never gets upset. As a true guru should. Even the disciple is not having the sense. He says, I've been eating all the different curries you made. Everything tastes the same. I mean, tastes bland. That is what he wants to say. Mother is not upset. On the contrary, she says, very well. One day I shall cook as they do in your part of the country. But you must show me how to cook. I am sure I can do that. Now you see the humility of Holy Mother. She says, perhaps I have not learned that technique. Can you teach me that? And he says, you may show me how to cook in your part of your country. And You add a lot of chilies, don't you? So she was even prepared to make the disciple happy, to cook whatever that disciple liked. Then the disciple says, not so much, but a curry need not necessarily taste bad because it is less pungent. So then mother, still that disciple is arguing with mother. And then mother says to Nalini, bring some gram tomorrow, chana. I shall make some soup. I used to cook very well, now I am out of practice. Holy Mother is saying that. At Kamarpukur, Lakshmi's mother and I used to cook. She could cook very well. One day, Master and Hriday sat for their meals. Referring to a preparation made by Lakshmi's mother, the master said, "Oh Ridu, the one who has cooked this may be compared to a physician Ramdas." Ramdas was a famous physician, was an excellent physician, very renowned physician. Whereas Srinath Sen was another physician, was just a quack. He used to treat simple diseases. But if you had serious problems, you had to go to Ramdas, physician Ramdas. So he was just joking, making fun of Holy Mother and saying, whoever has cooked this, he perhaps knew that it is Lakshmi's mother who has cooked. See, it is like an expert physician. Whereas Srinath Sen was only a quack. But Hriday was upset. He said, what you say is true, but you can get your quack physician at all times to render all kinds of service, even to massage your feet. You have to only send for her and she comes. But physician Ramdas takes a big fee for his visit and you cannot get him all the hours. What he meant was, moreover, people first consult a quack. He is your friend at all times. The master said, yes, that is true, that is true. She is always available. So here, the idea is that every time we don't need experts to solve our problems. Even a mediocre person, I mean, here it is explained in a different context. The context is food. So, Holy Mother, though she did not cook, but she was always available. That is more important. Somebody who is always available whenever you are in sorrow, whenever you are in trouble, maybe is not an expert person who can solve your problem in one stroke, but such people are so rare. So we have to do with some people who are always with you, even though the solution they suggest or they so like this quack doctor Srinath Sen, whose medicines did not work when the disease was serious, but still Holy Mother says, I mean, Hriday tells Sri Ramakrishna that Holy Mother at least is with you. Even though she is a quack, she is always available. Whereas Lakshmi's mother comes now and then. Who is going to cook you all these dishes permanently? So that is what uh, this conversation ends. Now we come to 8th May 1913 in Jairambati and we will discuss it in the next class. So let us see if there are any questions. Yeah, first question is, caste is created by human beings. Then why not allowed to be a sannyasi and also female? What happens to those who are not follower of Sri Ramakrishna? Whether one is a follower of Sri Ramakrishna or not, once that tradition has started, you should know that now sannyas is open to women all over the world. It's not necessarily that one has to be a follower of Sri Ramakrishna. Though he started the trend, there were Gargi and there were in ancient times there were women sannyasin, but it was rare. Normally it was difficult. So it's not necessary that one has to be a follower of Sri Ramakrishna to take. There are so many orders now. Uh, Seeing the success of Sharda Mutt and other mutts, there are other orders who have also started accepting women, not only irrespective of the caste and creed, but also any country, any woman from any country can uh, take sannyasa. So that is the answer. And moreover, caste is created by human beings. That is true. So if rules are made by human beings, it can be changed by human beings. We don't have to be rigid. There are many things we can change in our life which we do not do. We don't understand that we sometimes are bound by these rituals. rituals which were created not by prophets or by people of realization. That is the problem. People who have had realization, they are not so concerned or so bothered about the rituals. They just believe in certain rituals which really bring about a transformation. Like one of the rituals is mantra. Holy Mother never said, irrespective of anybody's caste, she used to say, just go on repeat mantra, japat siddhi, japat siddhi. So mantra in the beginning it is a ritual, but it is a ritual which if you persist solves your problems. So such rituals are not bad, but rituals which are done for the sake of doing it, like caste system and not touching this, not eating this, not eating that, and all those things, those have to be avoided. So sannyasa was not denied to the lower caste. Even in ancient ages, Vedic ages, if a person was a Gyani, he was given. But that tradition had to be revived. And that is why Sri Ramakrishna came, to give respect to the masses, to give respect to the underprivileged, and also to give respect to women, which was one of the main reasons why Sri Ramakrishna brought Sri Ma Sharda Devi with him. Now the last question and we'll close. Should we offer food to Thakur if we are about to partake of meat? Yeah, there is no restriction as far as food offered to Sri Ramakrishna is concerned. It's not a question of meat or fish or anything. Whatever you eat, whether you eat vegetarian food or anything, any food that agrees with you, that does not bring out the animal tendencies or does not bring your so whatever food which you can eat, of course it can be offered to Thakur. So that is the uh, only condition, and that is why when there is not a question of vegetarian, non-vegetarian and all those things. So Sri Ramakrishna, whatever food is acceptable to you, whatever food is healthy to you, which does not disturb your spiritual pursuits, that can be eaten by you, not only eaten by you, but can also be offered to Thakur. So we'll take your leave now.
Yeah. Maharaj, may I ask a question?
Yes.
Swamiji? Yes.
Yes.
One question, Swamiji. Whether it's the Holy Mother or Ramakrishna Math, or whether it's an internal or external sannyas, the question is there an age limit, i.e. the younger age limit or an elder age limit?
Is in the Ramakrishna order for practical purposes, because if there is no age limit in outside order, some orders they give sannyasa even at the age of 60, 70, 80. But here, because ours is a work-oriented organization where there is a lot of philanthropic work. So if there are aged people, you can't expect them to do some dedicated service to humanity. So the philanthropic work suffers. So we, ideally speaking, younger you join, the more easier it is to be part of the order. So there is a limit, 30 years limit, but sometimes it is relaxed. In case, yeah.
Dhanyavad, Swamiji.
Okay. But other orders, there are no restrictions outside, especially. Yeah. Okay.
Maharaj, I have a question too, Maharaj?
Oh, yes.
May I?
Yes.
Yeah. So you said about the Shraddh ceremony food, Maharaj. You said the deceased spirit eats through the people who eat it, yeah? His favorite food.
Yeah. No, they don't eat. I mean, what I said is, suppose you are eating some Shraddha food. You are a close relative of somebody who has passed away. So it's not that you are eating on their behalf. The satisfaction you feel in the mind, a person who is partaking of the Shraddha food, that satisfaction is conveyed because the cosmic mind, we are all one. So they have a subtle body. So their mind feels satisfied that at least my relative, once in a year, at least he or she is remembering me and eating or cooking that food and offering it to me, whether I'm able to take or not. So that is how they say, in the Shastras say, that it satisfies the spirit. So if the spirit is having a lot of desires, it is always better because they are if they are part of the family. But if they are not connected to you, then it can spiritually harm you. That is the idea. So what was your question?
So I have two questions in this context. So what exactly is the harm in eating it? What harm? What does it do?
Yeah, I'll tell you. Actually, Sri Ramakrishna, if you see the Shastras, there is no hard and fast rule. But you see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, especially the Bhakti movement, Vaishnavas, especially the Vaishnavas, they are very particular. They, in fact, not only Shraddha food, they don't eat other food also. They have to cook with their own hands. So that is one thing. But Shraddha food, what happens is, because Shraddha food is normally associated with some desires. Say you are offering some jalebis, somebody liked jalebis, and when you partake it, your mind is likely to get affected. That person who's desperate to eat jalebis, now that desire and that worldly desire of his, whatever items you eat, that can last for a long time. I mean, that can be prolonged, so that causes spiritual harm. A desire which you perhaps did not have, but by virtue of eating that Shraddha food, which was that spirit who is enjoying it through your mind, he is not enjoying it through your body, because he doesn't have a body, he just can get the satisfaction. Then every time he wants to eat, he might influence your body to take that food. That is how it works. So you go on eating, and you start developing a habit which is spiritually harmful. Physically also it might be harmful. So that is why Thakur forbade, because anything that you do which has some desire, that's why they say if somebody gives you something attached with some desire, then you don't take it.
Right. Yeah.
Some conditional donation, that's why I say, if you Ramakrishna Mission also, they say if somebody says no, you have to do this, you have to do that, then we normally don't take. If it's unconditional, you ask us, you spend it for this in whichever way you like. So unconditionally, if somebody's wish is satisfied, that is fine. But if that is conditional, if that person is very much attracted, we don't know whose Shraddha is going on. We can't go and a person whom we don't even know. So why should we take the burden of his sins or his desires? So you will be sharing a little desires. The tendency to eat that food may be may be increased. So that is why it might cause some harm. That is the reason. There are other reasons. Yeah.
No, that's one question. My second question is, the deceased, if he has already gone into another life, taken another body altogether.
Yes.
So then where is the validity of year after year after year?
That is why they say you do it for the first few years. You see, according to the Shastras, I'm not very particular. It's not very accurate, but they say the time scale changes. Say for 1 year of a deceased soul is almost like 1 day. 1 day of the deceased soul is like 1 year of ours. So though we may think 5 years have passed and he is not yet born, it's not so easy to get a new body. One has to get the right combination, to enter into a body. Most probably the spirit will be wandering in the sense it will be in a subtle form, waiting to get embodied. That is why they say the human body is so important. Manushyatva, to get a human body is such rare. So there is a huge waiting list there. That is why it is better to finish in this life itself and not wait for. That's why you don't have a choice. You see, the karma will, if a particular karma is there, then you have to have the right combination of father and mother, and you have to wait till that time. The genetic combination, there's so many samskaras which have to be worked out. So unless the right type of body, so there is a great chance that one will not be born immediately. So that is why, to be on the safer side, even if he is born, if you just offer something because first you have to offer to Vishnu, you have to offer to other gods, and then you offer to the ancestors. And when you offer to the Shraddha to one person, you are offering to many ancestors. In fact, 7 generations, if you remember their name, you have to offer, because 7 generations before somebody has died, he might have been born also, who knows, but still we offer. We don't leave any leave it to chance. That's the idea. But these things are, I mean, it's there because once Swami Vivekananda was challenged, Arya Samaj people do not believe in Shraddha. So they were terribly against. When he went to Punjab, when he was visiting Lahore and all those places, there was a Arya Samaji who said, if you can prove the importance of Shraddha, he said it's a superstitious ritual. I don't believe in that. Then Swamiji went to some library, he got some scriptural reference and showed that the Shraddha, he said, if you prove to me that Shraddha is true, I will leave this Arya Samaj. He was so arrogant. So Swamiji, there is a story like, I mean, it's happened in the life also, Eastern and Western. Then Swamiji had to refer to some books and told him, see, it's not just empty some kind of superstition that we are perpetuating. It's come as a tradition and it has a strong scientific basis and scriptural sanction also. See, scientific basis you cannot prove because the subtle body and all those things, it is so difficult to prove in laboratory. But logically, if you see, and if scriptural support is there, then we can say that these things, it's better to follow these traditions. So they are not without any basis. That's what I wanted to say. So that is the second question, isn't it? If he's born, what happens? So there's no harm in giving because there are more chances that he or she is not born. It takes time, at least not during our lifetime, because if we, for 50 years, for him it is just 50 days, na?
Yes.
So even if we do 10 years, that is like feeding the spirit for 10 days.
Yeah.
So the time scale, they say, changes a lot. That's why they do only once in a year. You're not supposed to, maybe the spirit awakens once in a year, it feels, oh, I'm missing all this food. So it will just hover around the people who are relatives. It will naturally go to the people who used to feed him or her. So at that time, once in a year, he will wake up, oh, where is my jalebi? Then you offer.
Kumbhakarna style.
Yes. Kumbhakarna also, I think there's so much of 6 months. It was 6 months actually. Yeah. This is 1 year.
Okay. Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay.